from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Tyler Kendall, I'm Joe Matthew. We're watching live images of the Mellon Auditorium here in downtown Washington, just a couple blocks from where we are seated right now as we await the President of the United States, expected to deliver the keynote address at what they're calling the Winning the AI Race Summit to begin any moment now.
The White House bills the speech as a showcase for how artificial intelligence is reshaping the American and global economy. We expect the president will sign executive orders, the next steps in the administration's, quote, AI action plan. The White House is expected to push for looser regulations and wider energy access in today's unveiling. We've got it all covered for you tonight, including new earnings reports from Alphabet, Tesla, and more just out, and the administration's progress on a trade deal with the European Union, all happening under the cloud of the Jeffrey Epstein case, as several developments on that front dog the White House tonight.
Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow is live from that AI summit right now. Caroline Hyde from global headquarters in New York watching earnings. Jennifer Dlouhy from the White House, along with our panelists and elected officials all on hand for us tonight.
But let's start with Ed Ludlow. He's the host of Bloomberg Tech and joins us live from the president's AI event here in Washington. Ed, the president is expected to speak any moment now. What are we expecting to hear from him when he takes the stage tonight?
Speak, but also the lineup of executive orders, right? Because as you said, this is a plan, an AI action plan, and speaking to a lot of government officials here, as well as the CEO of AMD, Lisa Su, she kind of felt that this action plan list was actionable. You're right that its basis is deregulation, cutting red tape, but the anxiety is largely to do with the energy sector and being able to move fast enough where America's ability to produce energy matches that of its willingness and speed in building AI infrastructure. You know, a lot of this has been a preamble throughout the day of both government officials and the private sector saying to the president, we really back this. We think it's a really great idea. The area where there's still some tension is the plan includes the export of American technology around the world, including to economic adversaries like China. And both the Vice President and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick framed it as we're completely willing to sell technology into China, but there has to be some reciprocity to this. We have to have them buy other goods, and there has to be an understanding of who's controlling the AI stack at the same time. So that's where the focus will be. But as you guys know, like we've covered this in the context of the president's visit to the Gulf and the Middle East, so far, when the president has said he will do something, the technology sector has followed very quickly and done it. And that's evidenced by the deals that NVIDIA and AMD were able to do selling chips direct to the Gulf. A continuation of that is what we expect from here.
Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow. Great to have you in town, Ed. Thank you. Ed will be with us throughout the hour here as we continue to bring you coverage of the president's remarks at the AI summit, flanked there on the stage by signage that says, winning the AI race. We'll bring you his remarks a little bit later on in the program. Tonight's AI event and presidential speech coming after we got some major earnings reports from some big tech names, Tesla and Alphabet among them. Tesla's second quarter earnings missing Wall Street expectations, but the shares are defying gravity at the moment, up just about 0.5%, a little over $1.50, while Alphabet reports strong second quarter revenue growth, also boosting guidance for 2025 spending, something that investors were pretty keen on here. And Alphabet shares are back on the rise. They've been up and down a bit now, up almost 2%. And I'm glad to say that we have more details live from world headquarters in New York from Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde. Caroline, it's great to have you with us here. What's got your attention in these two reports?
Well, just right off the back of where Ed Ludlow stands, all about the AI infusion in the US, this is exactly what Sundar Pichai is trying to express to his investor base in terms of how much he says within Alphabet, AI is positively impacting every single part of the business. That is why you see an increase to $85 billion in terms of capital expenditure for 2025. That's an increase of 13%. They've upped it $10 billion because they want to infuse and meet demand for cloud infrastructure that they provide, because they want to drive forward on AI overviews, because they want to continue to uptick the Gemini AI usage, which is just seeing about 70 million monthly active users at the moment. AI overviews is seeing 100 million monthly active users. They've got to be able to drive this forward with the infrastructure in place and the spending that is necessary. Initially, you did see that volatility in the shares and people tried to digest that capital expenditure. But I also think they were coming off the back of a really strong run in the stock. We're up 14% over the course of this month. You've seen a 10-day back-to-back gain for Google stock. That was the best performance we'd seen since 2010. So no wonder we saw a little bit of digestion. But then, Joe, you go to Tesla. And when you're looking at the numbers, the fundamentals, unlike that of Alphabet, are woeful. When you look at Alphabet, they saw revenue up some 14%, while revenue declined 12% for Tesla. You see profitability down 23% when you're looking at earnings per share, but people don't care about the fundamentals of this business, obviously, because they think about the future. They think about what Elon Musk, away from politics, can do for the business. He's eating, sleeping the work back at Tesla and trying to ensure that robotics is the future. That is all about AI. The Optimus, the humanoid robot, is the future. That's also all about AI. So this all really dovetails very nicely in this idea of winning this race. But we'll have to see whether Elon can steady the ship and point towards that sort of growth, because it's not clear in the fundamentals of the car business.
Joining us after hours, a rare treat to have Caroline Hyde with us, co-host of Bloomberg Tech, alongside Ed Ludlow. Great to see you both this evening. Thank you so much. As we prepare to hear the president's remarks, tonight's AI event happening under a growing cloud the president has over this controversy over convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, and is showing no signs of abating. With several developments coming through in just the last couple of hours, here's what we know. The Wall Street Journal is out with this exclusive report. The headline reading, quote, Justice Department told Trump in May that his name is among many in the Epstein files, unquote. The paper already, of course, being sued by the president for an article about a letter that he allegedly sent to Epstein. Reporting Attorney General Pam Bondi informed the president of the United States in May that his name was in the Epstein files, according to senior administration officials, noting Trump's name appeared multiple times. Now, being named is no indication of any wrongdoing. The White House is calling this report fake news. Still, the article does fan the flames over the president's ties to Epstein. That article was published just moments before we learned that the House Oversight Committee also has approved a subpoena of Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell, the committee announcing an August 11th deposition for Maxwell from federal prison. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche is also expected to meet with Maxwell in the coming days, according to the DOJ. All of that coming after a federal judge earlier today denied the Trump administration's request to unseal grand jury transcripts related to a mid-2000s criminal investigation of Jeffrey Epstein. The ruling, however, does not affect the release of grand jury transcripts in two other Epstein-related investigations, one from 2019, the other from 2020.
Those Epstein developments tonight as the White House tries to shift focus elsewhere. President Trump notching what's considered a trade victory with Japan, as our reporting indicates there could be progress on a potential agreement with the European Union. Among those in the room for tonight's AI event is Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. He celebrated the new trade framework with Japan, suggesting it could be a model for the EU. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent commented on the agreement this morning on Bloomberg.
I think it's very important to know that, 15% for Japan for reciprocal tariffs for autos, that is a different kind of deal, but because the Japanese proposed a very innovative solution.
Joining us now with the details is Bloomberg's Jennifer Dlouhy reporting live from the White House for us. Jen, we know Japan was prioritized in the talks, and the EU has appeared to move up in line as well. What does our reporting indicate about how close we could be to an announcement with that trading bloc?
Well, what we understand is that talks have really picked up between the U.S. and the EU, and they are progressing toward a deal that would see tariffs of about 15% placed on most European goods. Otherwise, the bloc would face tariffs of 30% coming due essentially August 1st under Trump's latest threat against the European Union. European negotiators are optimistic they can reach this deal, although we understand that the situation is fluid and nothing is imminent. Even so, the European negotiators have obviously developed a set of countermeasures just in case they are slapped with tariffs anyway. They are planning to potentially target some $106 billion of U.S. goods, specialty products, planes, cars, bourbon, and the like. Right now, the discussion is focusing a lot on potential exemptions for, as the Treasury Secretary mentioned, automobiles, as we saw Japan got yesterday in its deal with the U.S. The European Union is also pushing for special exemptions on other sectoral tariffs, including those for steel and aluminum, as well as pharmaceuticals. One interesting thing to note, this deal that is emerging with the EU and coming together, like we saw with Indonesia, could include exemptions for products that just aren't made in the United States. We're talking about special machinery and generic medicines there.
Really interesting and great reporting, Jen. Thank you. Bloomberg's Jennifer Dlouhy live on the North Lawn of the White House with us this evening. Control of the U.S. House next year could come down to just a handful of swing districts, including one high-profile seat in New York.
Mike Lawler, Mr. Salt. Well, it should guarantee your district. I mean, you worked hard for New York, right? Without you and your couple of friends from New York, that wouldn't have happened.
Democrats in New York and California flipped 7 seats in the last cycle. 4 of those were in New York. We plan on flipping the 5th in 2026, and the 17th congressional district will be a high priority.
Joining us now live from Capitol Hill is the congressman who currently holds that seat. He just heard his name from President Trump. Republican Mike Lawler of New York. That's Mr. Salt right there. It's good to see you, Congressman. Welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. Big news today. Well, absolutely. We've been looking forward to talking with you about your decision to run for re-election and not to run for governor of New York. The idea here is you made clear you're well positioned to run for governor in New York, but it seems you might be more valuable to Republicans in Washington. Did President Trump ask you to stay here in D.C.?
Well, look, over the last 6 months, I have, weighed this decision and really went through my own process to make a determination of what was best ultimately for me, my family, my district, and New York. I've been able to do a lot in the last 2.5 years to not only support my district, but to fight for New York, including lifting the cap on salt. Democrats said they were going to get that done when they had complete control. They promised New Yorkers they would deliver on that. They did not. I fought and got that done, went toe-to-toe with some of my own colleagues, and pushed back against efforts by the Senate and others to bring that all the way down to 0. So we were successful in that. That weighed heavily on me, the work that we've been able to accomplish. And look, my district obviously is one of the most competitive in the country. In the last election, 35 seats were decided by 5 points or less. Mine was not one of them. I won by 6.5 points in a district that has 80,000 more Democrats than Republicans. So I understand how important my district is, being one of only 3 Republicans to represent a district won by Kamala Harris last November, how important it is to keeping the majority. I also understand how important it is to have a strong candidate for governor. And so I weighed all of this and ultimately made a decision that I'm comfortable with in remaining in the House and continuing the work that I've done on financial services, on foreign affairs, as chair of the Middle East and North Africa subcommittee. There's a lot we're dealing with respect to Iran and Israel and our Arab partners in the region. So, a lot of work ahead. And, certainly last week I met with the president, had a fulsome discussion on all of these issues, including the New York City mayor's race, the governor's race, and Congress. And the president certainly, expressed his preference that I stay in the House. But ultimately, this was my decision and one that I made after months of deliberation.
Well, building off of this, if we just stick with the governor's race for a moment here, Congressman, do you think that your fellow House member, Elise Stefanik, should jump into the race? Did you discuss with her your decision ahead of time?
No, her and I did not have a discussion ahead of time. Obviously, Elise has intimated that she is strongly considering running. My view is if she's going to do it, she should get in. And if she's not, she should make that clear. We need to unify behind a candidate and start to build a campaign to defeat Kathy Hochul. She's the most incompetent governor in America, bar none. And has created a calamity in our state. We lead the nation in out-migration. We have the highest tax burden, the worst business climate, a declining quality of life with a crime and migrant crisis. And as governor and lieutenant governor, she added $100 billion in state spending in 1 decade. And that is a large part of why New York is so unaffordable to so many and why people continue to leave the state in droves.
Well, everybody's talking tough, Congressman. It's the season, I'm sure, as we heard from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee put out a statement saying Mike Lawler might have chickened out of a statewide race, but he cannot outrun the heinous record of rubber stamping Trump's extreme agenda at every turn. You have a special way here in a state that has a habit of electing Democrats. How do you keep this district red?
Look, I have always appealed directly to the voters, regardless of party, on the issues that matter. At the end of the day, whether you're Republican or Democrat doesn't really matter. What people are focused on is they want a good-paying job to provide for their families, a quality education for their children, access to housing and health care, and they want to live in a safe neighborhood. And that has always been my priority, my focus, and we have delivered for my district. And when you look at the tax bill, the fact is, I guess my Democratic colleagues are opposed to giving seniors a $6,000 tax deduction. They're opposed to an enhanced child tax credit. They're opposed to making the rates permanent. They're opposed to the small business tax credits and deductions. They're opposed to lifting the cap on salt. So ultimately, that's something they're going to have to explain to voters why they're against things, common sense things like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Most Americans support that. They support the common sense reforms to make sure that able-bodied adults and illegal immigrants aren't milking the system and taking away from the very people who need Medicaid, our seniors, our children, our IDD community. So I will continue to defend my record and run proudly on the work that I've done here in Washington. And I know when the votes are tallied next November, I will be successful once again. The Democrats certainly haven't learned in their previous races against me. But beyond that, they also are going to have to deal with the real reality, which is that they have an avowed socialist who is spewing Marxist theory about seizing the means of production, trying to ban private ownership of property, freeze the rent, free busing, government-run grocery stores, on the verge of becoming mayor of New York City, the financial capital of the world. And there's a reason that Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer and Kathy Hochul are betwixt and between. They don't know whether to endorse them or oppose them, because either way, they're screwed.
Well, Congressman, in our final minutes here, I want to get into some actual policy with you, because we had House Speaker Mike Johnson here at our Bloomberg Bureau earlier today. He said that Republicans are already starting to work on a second reconciliation package and that they're looking to get this done by late fall. You perhaps know better than anyone how difficult these negotiations can be. What sort of priorities do you think could actually get through the House as it stands now for a second package down the line?
Well, look, obviously, I'm open to listening to the Speaker's thoughts on this and my other colleagues, but I would have to really understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish with the second reconciliation bill and what would be included in it. We have an appropriations process and a government funding that is coming due September 30th. That is our priority, our focus right now. The Appropriations Committee is working through that. It's going to require bipartisan support, whether it's a CR for the short term or whether it is the actual appropriations bills. I think we need to get about that work. We need to be working to address the funding of our government. A shutdown would not serve anyone well, least of all the American people. So I think it's imperative that obviously we get focused on that as we work through this August recess and come back in September. And make sure that we really address that before getting to any discussion about a second reconciliation bill.
All right, it's going to be a busy fall, no doubt. Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York, we thank you so much for joining Bloomberg. And as we await President Trump to begin his remarks on artificial intelligence, we want to bring in Laura Galante for the conversation. She previously led cyber intelligence for the Director of National Intelligence, and she's now principal at Westexec Advisors. Laura, I love your perspective here because the backdrop of this summit is really about competition with China. How should the administration be quantifying this race? Can you give us some perspective here? What gives Washington or Beijing the edge when it comes to AI?
The action plan that the White House put out today, just a few hours ago, that Trump's going to be talking about shortly, really speaks to the need for the U.S. to stay dominant and drive new dominance in AI vis-a-vis China. And where I think this plan is a little bit creative and actually forward-looking is in how it positions the U.S. to also have open source models, not just the proprietary models like ChatGPT that we know so well, but also some of the open source and open weight models that China's really been able to pioneer. And this action plan says we need to invest in those too. So just one of the marks in this plan that's coming out that I think, again, speaks to the need for continued U.S. dominance in this space.
Laura, the conversation was largely about adding guardrails during the Biden administration. Chuck Schumer talked about this as well when rolling out a potential blueprint that Democrats could follow. This seems to be the opposite approach. This is tearing down guardrails, cutting red tape. Do you worry about the lack of restrictions could create a dangerous situation for a technology that's advancing quicker than a lot of people can understand?
Joe, you're right that guardrails were the focus and security really was the focus of the last administration. But there's a lot of continued thread from the Biden administration efforts here. One that I'll mark is that they have a real focus on secure by design for AI and incident response for AI. What that means is they're looking to find ways to incent the private sector who's driving these models to find secure ways to develop this code and to test it. Now, devil's in the details in an implementation here, so we'll see how this all plays out. But there are a couple marks here that are really continuations of that focus on security and a dynamic process around it.
For our viewers now, you can see that President Trump has taken the stage. He's starting his remarks. We'll bring you them shortly. Laura, I want to also ask you here about energy and the need for energy consumption. I was at the Pennsylvania Energy and Innovation Summit last week in Pittsburgh. There was this huge emphasis on trying to ramp up production. In your view, does the U.S. have the type of capacity to meet the energy demand coming from artificial intelligence?
To put it simply, we don't have the energy generation or distribution even in place to meet the need that's coming and is here today for AI. We really in the 70s sort of stagnated in terms of—
Laura, I'm going to interrupt you. I'm sorry to do that, but we just want to bring everyone into the room for the president here. He's just getting to the matter at hand. The president is at this AI policy event hosted by the All In podcast and the Hill and Valley Forum. This is live from Washington on Bloomberg.
100 million, that's not bad. But that's not as good as the signing bonus we got. We got a $550 billion signing bonus for the country. And we had the tariff at 25%. As you know, we had a tariff at 25%. And these are great people that we negotiated with. But we agreed to reduce it to 15 based on the fact that Japan has agreed for the first time ever to open up its country to trade so that all of our American businesses and business geniuses, including many in this room, can go out and do business openly and freely in Japan, a very rich and prosperous and profitable and wonderful country, frankly. And we will pay a zero tariff as we do business in Japan. So we're paying zero, they're paying 15. We're getting $550 billion, and to be exact, it's 90% of that, but we control the whole lot of it. And it's really been great. And they're very happy, and their stock market went up, and our stock market went up, and that's supposed to be the way it is. Ours went way up, and theirs went up. And we've made numerous other deals like that. But the opening up of a country is very important to us. We have numerous countries that have opened their doors, just made some incredible transactions, but we're going to have a very, very simple tariff for some of the countries. We have so many countries you can't negotiate deals with everyone, so we'll have a straight, simple tariff of anywhere between 15 and 50%. A couple we have 15 because we haven't been getting along with those countries too well, so we just say, let's pay 50, and that's the way it is. But remember, we get countries that were closed, always closed. Everyone in this room would never remember any of them to be open. We've offered such a deal to the European Union, where we're in serious negotiations, and if they agree to open up the union to American businesses, then we will let them pay a lower tariff. So the tariff is very important, but the opening of a country, I think, can be more important if our businesses do the job that they're supposed to be doing. Such openings are worthy of many points in tariffs, and they're a good thing, not only for, as an example, Japan or Europe, but certainly a great thing for America, because it allows our businesses to go out and fairly compete and do really well if they compete properly, like the people that I know. Everyone in this room practically I know has competed very successfully. I haven't seen any, and I know the losers just like I know the winners. I tell you, I don't see any of the losers here. But now if some of the countries that pay 25% or more on autos complain, remember that Japan was willing to pay upfront the $550 billion for that privilege of negotiating with the United States of America. We also made a deal yesterday with the Philippines and Indonesia, which in both cases will be opening up their country. And we're in the process of completing our deal with China. And as you know, the UK, we made a deal. It was a very good deal for everybody. Everybody's happy. It's always nice when everybody can be happy. But mostly we'll be charging straight tariffs to most of the rest of the world, because we have over 200 countries. People don't realize that's a lot of deals. Even if you're like me, a deal junkie, that's a lot of deals. That would be too much for anybody. Ooh. How did we do with this country that I never heard of? We got a lot of deals cooking, but America is taking in hundreds of billions of dollars like it never has before. Investments into our country at the highest point ever in history, and we've just really been opened up for business for 3 of the 6 months. The first couple of months, we got ourselves all set, done a great job with our military. As you know, you saw that 2 weeks ago when you saw the way those incredible B-2s flew into Iran and took out an entire nuclear potential deadly force. But I want to thank some of the incredible people that I see before me, including White House AI czar David Sachs. He's been great for organizing this very important summit, and especially for putting it in D.C., where it's a little bit easier. I don't know if it's easy for you, but it's a hell of a lot easier for me. Along with his colleagues at the All In podcast, which is very good. I did that podcast a year and a half ago, and I said, this is something that was pretty new, pretty raw. Everybody I knew saw that podcast. I said, well, he's got something pretty good. Who is that guy? He's a smart guy, by the way. I think if I ever get in, which at the time people were saying I had a shot, not as good a shot as it turned out. We won in numbers that nobody believes. We won every swing state. We won by millions and millions of votes, winning the popular vote. We won with the districts, as they would call them, 2,750 to 505. And that's why the map is almost completely red, except for a couple of little blue areas on each side of it. But it was a great experience, frankly, for me, and hopefully it's a great experience and been a great experience for our country, because they're saying we had the greatest 6 months that a president has ever had, the opening 6 months. And I'm not even sure, maybe 6 months, I'm not sure it's the opening, but let's call it the opening 6 months. It sounds a little bit nicer. I want to also say hello and thank to Chamath and his wonderful wife, Nat. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much. It was great seeing you again. Great couple. David Friedberg, and even, as we know, Jason Calacanis. I say even. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. Yeah, he's a good person. Thanks as well to the Hill and Valley Forum and our future Undersecretary of State, Jacob Hellberg. Good work. Go stand up, Jason. Good.
Listening and watching live to President Trump and his remarks before the AI summit that's underway this afternoon here in Washington, D.C. We'll get back to the president when he gets back to the matter at hand. Joining us now with some reaction to the politics of the day here, and specifically what's happening on Capitol Hill, is Republican Congressman Mike Flood of Nebraska. I should note, the newly elected chair of the Republican Main Street Caucus. Congressman, it's great to have you back on Bloomberg TV and radio. I guess I should call you Mr. Chairman. Thanks for joining us this evening as lawmakers from the House head out of town for August recess. There are a lot of questions about what's left in the legislative agenda. We just spent some time with your colleague from New York, Mike Lawler, talking about a second reconciliation package. I wonder what comes first, that or a budget for the new fiscal year? Because we're hearing a lot about a shutdown, Congressman. I'm sure you are, too.
I don't want to think about a shutdown. If you look at what we did in March, government was funded with the help of Democrats. I want to do that again. But this time, I don't want to do it with a continuing resolution. I want to do it with a budget. We've got extremely talented appropriations members on both sides of the aisle. They work all year round to put this budget together. We can do this. We can get this done. It needs to be bipartisan. And if we start talking about shutdowns, CRs, all this stuff, I think we jinx ourselves. Let's focus on what we can get done here and put some certainty out there.
Congressman, just back to the second reconciliation package for a minute. House Speaker Mike Johnson said that this could get done by late fall. Is that a realistic timeline when, as you're outlining, we're looking at potentially a showdown here when it comes to government funding?
Well, it depends on what's in it. You know, there's a reason some of the things didn't make it in reconciliation, because we couldn't find 218 votes to make it happen. So we're going to have to find, there's not a lot of low-hanging fruit right in front of us, because we just went through this entire process. I have no doubt we'll be able to find some. I have no doubt we'll be able to cut some more mandatory spending. That's what reconciliation is all about. But I actually think it's dangerous to focus on reconciliation. We have to remember, this budget that we have to do, no matter what happens with the second reconciliation, we have to get to 60 votes in the Senate. We cannot dismiss this idea that this next step is not going to require bipartisanship. And I get it. Like, if you're Chuck Schumer, he did the right thing back in March. But look at what happened to him. Because he worked with us, he lost 12 favorability percentage points in New York. AOC said she's going to run for his seat in New York. And Chris Murphy says he's going to take him out as minority leader. He's got no incentive to work with us. So this is why we need the American people, and we need the Democrats to know that we need to work in a bipartisan way, which means us too. This means Mike Flood. This means Mike Johnson, Tom Emmer, Steve Scalise. We all have to come to the table, and we have to figure out how we're going to get to 60 votes in the Senate and get as many votes here in the House, and that's easier said than done, but it's way more responsible than talking about a continuing resolution or even reconciliation at this point, because this is the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
Well, we'll move away from reconciliation for a moment, then. I'm going to bring up a whole other R word, and it's not regular order. How about rescissions, Congressman? That might be some low-hanging fruit, as we've been hearing from your colleagues in the Republican conference in the House, to claw back funding that had been allocated for the Department of Education. When does that happen?
Well, I don't want to talk about rescissions either. We have a process for appropriations. We appropriate the money. We pass a budget. We use our Article 1 authority and our power of the purse to do our job. Listen, I signed up to be in Congress. I signed up to help craft legislation, put budgets together, decide where the spending goes. I don't want to hear the word rescission. I don't want to hear the word impoundment. I really don't even want to hear the word reconciliation. I want to get back to work, and I want to pass a budget. That's what I did for 10 years when I was in the state legislature in Nebraska. Every single one of them were balanced. I was the speaker for 6 of those. That's what people expect. That's what families do. That's what people in America do when they get around the table and they look at their statement online and figure out, oh, I'm spending too much here. I could do more here. Like, that's when you start talking about these other words, when you start talking about these other legislative gymnastics that people want to do, I think we're taking away and we're actually disrespecting the very talented people that wake up every day and call themselves appropriators and sit on that committee.
This is a new level of fire, Tyler, in the Republican Main Street Caucus. This is fascinating.
Well, particularly when we've heard the OMB director, Russ Vought, say that there's going to be more rescissions packages. So it is interesting to hear your view. I also want to get your view on another issue that potentially had the House leaving town early this week, and that has to do with the potential release of files when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, the House did end up subpoenaing Ghislaine Maxwell, one of his associates. And I want to get your view on this because it's our understanding that there's going to be a deposition on August 11th. If House leadership's plan here was to try to make this story go away over the August recess, does this now risk prolonging it?
I don't think anybody wants it to go away. I think we want to be transparent. Listen, there's not one Democrat or one Republican that serves in the House or the Senate that wants any child sex predator to get off or in any way escape justice. We want you in jail. For some of you, we want you to get the death penalty. Like, this is something that we want to be very clear about. If I had this file right now, I would give it to your cameraman. I wouldn't even read it. I just hand it to him so that we could get you the information. But I don't run the Department of Justice, right? Like, I'm a congressman for Nebraska. Jamie Comer's looking into it. He's going to get on top of this. He's going to do a great job. I wouldn't want that guy looking, in everybody else's business. He's going to do it. We're going to pass a resolution. Listen, the Democrats don't want to talk about the fact that they've got no plan, no vision, no mission. They've got this Epstein thing. And by the way, their attorney general had the better part of 4 years to do whatever he wanted. If he had probable cause, he could have charged people. He could have released this. He could have done 1,000 things. But they did none. And suddenly, it's like they found an issue that the media is getting excited about, and it takes all the pressure off the fact that that right now they can't run a two-car funeral. To be quite honest, they can't run a two-car funeral. So this is what they're doing. Is it time to go back to Nebraska? Yeah, this is Mike Flood 2.0.
It seems like you might be. I think our cameraman Harvey might come with you, so make sure you hand that over to us, Congressman, when you get it.
You want me to give him the file? If I had it, I'd give him the file, yeah.
That would be great. Epstein's a good guy, and you can trust him. I'm curious about what's waiting for you when you get home. I know that it's going to be August recess. There are going to be a lot of town halls. Is this going to be another instance where you're getting an earful about Medicaid, cuts to other programs, USAID? What are you going to hear from voters?
Well, I do hold town halls, and I will be having a town hall in Nebraska in early August. And I am a firm believer that if you run for this job and you're passionate about doing a good job and serving all of the people, you should be willing to stand in the town square, defend your ideas, defend your votes, and get feedback from those that you serve, whether you want to hear it or not, because that's the system that works in America. That's our democracy, and I'm looking forward to it. What am I doing this August? I'm not going anywhere because my oldest is going to college, and my wife said we are not going to miss 1 minute of his time before he leaves the nest. And so I'm going to be based in Nebraska, and I'm going to enjoy it. You have time for a quick story? Maybe I should.
Let's see how quick it is. Is it about Jay Powell?
No, it's about my son. So when he was 8, Mandy and I were having one of those marital arguments that you have. It happens to everybody. And I went to go tuck Brendan in. This is my oldest. And I was tucking him in, and I said, Brendan, love you, good night. And he said, Dad, can I tell you something? And I said, what's that? He said, if something happens between you and Mom, you know I'm with her. That just tells you how tight my son is with my wife. And so this is going to be a tough month for us. But this is what a lot of parents are doing. Yeah, this is the important stuff.
All right. Well, I'm going to leapfrog off of what Joe just alluded to, which is that we do want to ask you a question. Actually, we're going to head back to President Trump now, but Republican Congressman Mike Flood of Nebraska, this was a wide-ranging conversation. Chair of the Republican Main Street Caucus, we do thank you so much for joining Bloomberg. We're going to go now back to President Trump. He's speaking at an AI summit here in Washington, D.C. Let's listen in.
Suddenly engaged in a fast-paced competition to build and define this groundbreaking technology that will determine so much about the future of civilization itself because of the genius and creativity of Silicon Valley. And it is incredible genius. Without question, the most brilliant place anywhere on earth. America is the country that started the AI race. And as President of the United States, I'm here today to declare that America is going to win it. We're going to work hard. We're going to win it. because we will not allow any foreign nation to beat us. Our children will not live on a planet controlled by the algorithms, the adversaries advancing values and interests contrary to our own. We don't want to have contrary interests. We want to get along, and we'll get along with other countries. We're having a great relationship, as I told you, with those countries that we mentioned, with Japan and Indonesia and so many others. The European Union, we're getting along. We're getting along very well with China. A lot of respect for President Xi. We have a great relationship, and we'll see how it all works out. But we're getting along with countries it's really been pretty amazing, I will say that, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. So from this day forward, it'll be a policy of the United States to do whatever it takes to lead the world in artificial intelligence, such an important thing happening. This is really something that nobody expected. It just popped out of the air, and here we are. But we will defend our nation, our values, our future, and our freedom, and it will be really great. But what we really need to be successful is a very simple phrase called common sense, and that begins with a common sense application of artificial and intellectual property rules. It's so important. You can't be expected to have a successful AI program when every single article, book, or anything else that you've read or studied, you're supposed to pay for. Gee, I read a book, I'm supposed to pay somebody. And, you know, we appreciate that, but you just can't do it because it's not doable. And if you're going to try and do that, you're not going to have a successful program. I think most of the people in the room know what I mean. When a person reads a book or an article, you've gained great knowledge. That does not mean that you're violating copyright laws or have to make deals with every content provider. And that's a big thing that you're working on right now, I know, but you just can't do it. China's not doing it, and if you're going to be beating China, and right now we're leading China very substantially in AI, very, very substantially, and nobody's seen the amount of work that's going to be bursting upon the scene. But you have to be able to play by the same set of rules. So when you have something, when you read something, and when it goes into this vast intelligence machine, we'll call it, you cannot expect to every single time say, oh, let's pay this one that much, let's pay this one. It just doesn't work that way. Of course, you can't copy or plagiarize an article, but if you read an article and learn from it, we have to allow AI to use that pool of knowledge without going through the complexity of contract negotiations, of which there would be thousands for every time we use AI. We also have to have a single federal standard, not 50 different states regulating this industry of the future. And some people would say, gee, that's an unpopular thing to say. I was told before I got up here, this is an unpopular thing because some people, they don't want that. But I want you to be successful. And you can't have one state holding you up. You can't have 3 or 4 states holding you up. You can't have a state with standards that are so high that it's going to hold you up. You have to have a federal rule and regulation. Hopefully you'll have the right guy in this position that's going to supplant the states. If you are operating under 50 different sets of state laws, the most restrictive state of all will be the one that rules. So you could have a state run by a crazy governor, a governor that hates you, a governor that's not smart, or maybe a governor that's very smart, but decides that he doesn't like the industry and he can put you out of business because you're going to have to go to that lowest common denominator. We need one common sense federal standard that supersedes all states, supersedes everybody, so you don't end up in litigation with 43 states at one time. You got to go litigation free. It's the only way. And we also have to watch Europe, Asia, and all foreign countries so that they don't make rules and regulations that likewise make it impossible for you to do business, and where you'd have to make everything in AI cater to them, because again, you'd have to cater to the toughest country or to the toughest state. You can't do that because it would ruin it. I just terminated all of the, as an example, California car emissions rules, which were a disaster. It cost them just billions of dollars as an industry, but thousands of dollars per car, the emission rule standard, because they were making the production of an automobile almost impossible and at a tremendously higher cost, much more expensive than it should cost, for very little gain, for actually, in my opinion, negative gain. The automobile was worse. Under this administration, our innovation will be unmatched and our capabilities will be unrivaled. And with the help of many of the people in this room, America's ultimate triumph will be absolutely unstoppable. We will be unstoppable as a nation. Again, we're way ahead and we want to stay that way. We can't let individual smaller units stop it, because that's the only thing that can stop it and can really mess it up. As with any such breakthrough, this technology brings the potential for bad as well as for good, for peril as well as for progress. But the daunting power of AI is it's not going to be a reason for retreat from this new frontier. On the contrary, it is the more reason we must ensure it is pioneered first and best. We have to have the best, the first pioneer. We are the best and the first pioneers, and we're going to be really putting a nation that we love, America, we're going to be putting it first. I have an expression, America first, make America great again. A lot of great expressions, but they're all so true. To make America great again, we're going to make this industry absolutely the top, because right now it's a beautiful baby that's born. We have to grow that baby and let that baby thrive. We can't stop it. We can't stop it with politics. We can't stop it with foolish rules and even stupid rules. At the same time, we want to have rules, but they have to be smart. They have to be brilliant. They have to be more brilliant than even the technology itself. Surely there will be challenges on the path ahead, but together we will meet them and transcend them all. We are Americans, and we are Americans first. I have a couple of people I know that don't happen to be from here, but I wish you a lot of luck anyway. I'm looking at 3 people that are not Americans, but they're very good people. Please treat them nicely. But we do not shrink from the future or cower in the face of uncertainty. We dominate the future. We conquer new frontiers, and we control our own fate, and we determine by doing that our own destiny. Winning this competition will be a test of our capacities unlike anything since the dawn of the space age. I believe that. It's hard to believe as the president, the amount of enthusiasm for this one industry. I mean, I can talk about cars where we're doing incredibly well. We have car companies moving in all the time, but I talk about other industries. Everybody's saying this is going to dominate the world. It's going to dominate every industry that ever conceived. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's true, but I can tell you that a lot of very brilliant people think it is true. It'll dominate everything. It will challenge us to marshal all of our strength and flex the muscles of American ingenuity and resolve like probably never before. It will require us to blast through obsolete systems, cut through thickets of regulation. We've got to get rid of some of the regulation, but we want good regulation and rebuild the industrial bedrock of our country. And perhaps most importantly, winning the AI race.
Live sound from President Trump speaking in downtown Washington. We'll keep tabs on his AI speech this evening. The remarks coming as a number of stories on everything from trade to Jeffrey Epstein play out behind the scenes on another busy week in Washington. Joining us now, tonight's political panel. Maura Gillespie is with us, the founder, principal, Blue Stack Strategies, our Republican strategist, alongside Democratic strategist Aisha Mills, the founder, principal of Community Asset Management. It's great to see both of you. We're talking about something a little bit differently this evening, and I'd like to get to a few topics with you, but the president embracing AI. Aisha, I'll start with you here because there are some concerns by Democrats who were used to the idea of putting guardrails on an emerging and potentially dangerous technology under the Biden administration. And we're seeing largely the opposite now with an all-of-government approach at cutting red tape and hastening this advanced technology. Is this the right approach right now?
Well, it isn't. And, you know, in addition to this flagrant deregulation that completely has no guardrails at all, which is nonsensical, the thing that concerns me most is this third executive order that the president has is quote unquote called an anti-woke AI order. And what he's also attempting to do is to censor artificial intelligence and the technologies that are developed here in the United States. And that is just completely asinine and kills global competitiveness. You can't have an artificial intelligence technology that essentially is not allowed to analyze, sort, and be able to produce demographic data, to produce data on our climate and what's happening all across the world. You can't possibly neuter, essentially, and censor data and expect to have a competitive business, because you have to make business decisions, if it's market analysis, if it is risk assessment, which is really what climate data does, is it helps companies and governments be able to assess risk. So I think that there's a lot of what's not being said here, which is frankly counter to the free-wielding, free market ideology that he's propagating, that would essentially make the U.S. Development of AI, actually, it would kill our global competitiveness. And what it would do is it would stifle companies' ability to really be able to dig in there and create the technology that's going to have meaningful outcomes for people all around this globe. And that's going to hinder, frankly, our economy.
Well, Maura, I'd love to bring you into the conversation here, too, and get your opinion on this, because one of the headlines that just crossed the Bloomberg terminal when it comes to President Trump, actually speaking about this very issue, it says Trump says that there needs to be AI rules, but they have to be smart. What is the balance here when it comes to regulating AI moving forward?
So I think what Ayesha is talking about is that what are the parameters, right? I mean, I think by and large, most people don't understand AI. We as humans it's something that we don't fully understand, but the basic tenet is that it is based on input from human beings. And so what Trump is trying to say is that he thinks those algorithms are biased. Okay, so then who is the arbiter of putting in that information to then generate the data? And so I think that that is still a very large question on that tenet there, and he did not have an answer. Thus far, does not have an answer, and so that will need to be fleshed out before anyone can really weigh whether this is a good policy plan or not, because it's really pretty vague in those terms. So, I don't know that the constituents all across the country, when members of Congress go home in August this week for the House, will be asking, what are the parameters of AI intelligence data entry, but I do think that they are concerned because they don't understand it. And largely what we see is when people don't understand something, they immediately are afraid of it.
I want to ask you both about some of the other remarks the president was making about trade. That was the big story this morning before he turned to his remarks on AI. And we heard about it directly from the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, speaking on Bloomberg TV and radio, and spoke to his working relationship with the president as they get through these deals. Listen.
When President Trump tells me what his goals are, I think about what is the best way for me to give good framing to market participants, for them to understand what he's doing, because he always has a plan. It's not always obvious.
So, Ayesha, we got a trade deal, or at least the framework of a deal with Japan. That was followed on with a series of headlines pointing us to what could be an imminent deal with the EU. We talked about this with Howard Lutnick today, as well as Peter Navarro, and they're feeling pretty good about things currently at the White House. The markets are as well, as we notch new highs ahead of this August 1st deadline. How do you rationalize that, if anything more than this test of the Trump tariff regime appears to be working?
Yeah, I think that is such a fair question. I know people have been raising that a lot. If the tariffs are so awful, then why isn't the economy completely crashed, right? Now, I think that that's an interesting question. I also think we should honor and respect the intelligence of everybody who's watching and understand that some of these are going to be like lagging indicators, right? So the president having a good idea today that no one really can explain the economics around it or have like a real economic theory or projection and analysis around why it makes sense for 10 years, for 20 years. But it's an idea. And so now you've got his folks who are just going to go out and sell it, right? Sell the art of the deal without any real thought about the long-term impact. I think that that's the thing that should be giving us all pause. It's really difficult to make decisions and make projections when they run afoul of, counter to, or just don't even make economic sense, right? And the fact that they're admitting and acknowledging that they don't really want to have any communication around it or a deep game plan. It's just the president has a vision and I'm going to go out there and sell the vision. I think that that should give us all pause, because while we may not see deep volatility in this moment while the conversations are happening, I think that there are major consequences that we should understand at least for a decade, 20 years out as these conversations are happening. That's the part of the analysis and the data that we're missing. And I think that, you know, we would all do ourselves a disservice by pretending that that doesn't matter, because it does.
Well, Maura, to build off of this, we had reporting on the Bloomberg terminal this morning that we could be getting close to a trade deal with the European Union. But we also had reporting that they're preparing retaliation if a deal doesn't get done. And we know that the EU is looking at targeting some of those politically sensitive goods in red states like soybeans in Louisiana, where House Speaker Mike Johnson is from. How politically potent could this issue be as lawmakers make their way back home in the August recess? How are Republicans going to be messaging around the potential economic consequences here?
Well, and that's something that I think that many of the members of the House GOP especially are focused on is how do they handle those town halls with the myriad of concerns, you know, folks have at home about prices and cost of living. And so when it comes to tariffs, I do think that during the 2024 election, it wasn't fully explained that the short-term pains, as the president was calling them, for these long-term gains would be directly impacting U.S. consumers. And so, you know, when you look at those issues you just mentioned, some of the things that the EU is looking to target, even with Japan, you know, with the tariffs on steel and aluminum, Japanese importing cars, you know, what's the cost benefit of just, you know, paying for those resources or paying for the fully finished car coming in from Japan, you know, based on those costs. I do think that there are going to be conversations to be had about, is this a plan that's working for everyday Americans? I don't know that it necessarily will, but I do think that there are a lot in the GOP who are willing to give the president a little bit of time for his plan to flesh out. And you're seeing that right now. They will have to answer their constituents, but they're going to be touting other things and trying to focus on the ways they are trying to spur the economy and spur manufacturing here in the United States.
So focus as well on clawing back funding more. And you know a bit about this, having worked for a former Republican speaker in John Boehner. It's been a while since we've seen a rescissions package pass, but that, of course, took place just days ago. And we talked about it with Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania, who's ranking member on the House Budget Committee, and took a pretty hard line on this, as many Democrats are, about what he sees happening in the administration if they pass another rescissions package and what it will mean for Capitol Hill. Listen.
There is no question that another rescissions package from this White House is them essentially saying, we want a full government shutdown. Russell Vought, by the way, last week, let's not forget what he said. He said the problem with the budget process is that it's too bipartisan. So he's outright saying that they want a government shutdown and they want to force one.
Right, that's the top Democrat on the Budget Committee. Maura, you heard what he said. Another rescissions package from this White House is saying we want a full government shutdown. Is that what's going to happen?
I would say that another rescissions package is just more of the separations of powers, those lines being muddied. I do think that Speaker Johnson needs to have just to keep the confidence of his chairman and his committees, knowing that they have this power, which the power of the purse does belong with Congress. It belongs there, and we have that for a reason. And so blurring those lines even further will make the job of Speaker harder, but also for those chairmen to know where they stand. Because, again, they have to go home to their constituents and explain the cost of things, the cuts to things. And while they agreed on one thing and then the president comes in and says, no, actually, I don't agree with that, I'm going to take it away from you, that's going to be tough to report back to your constituents and explain why. I do think as the president's a lame duck president, does his approval in the next few years go down as a result, and how long do those members stick out their necks for him is to be seen. And I do think that I don't know necessarily that this is them wishing for a government shutdown, because politically we know that it doesn't really help. But both sides tend to lose, but especially the party in power. So I don't think that it's going to look good on them to do so. So in this case, I would say, no, it's not a good strategy for the White House to be thinking that way. And quite frankly, we should want our members of Congress to be working together, to be working across the aisle, collaborating on issues like this, especially when you have such a close majority, a slim majority, as we've seen in the House and in the Senate, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Aisha, some Republicans have also argued that rescissions will save the government money. And I want to point out President Trump says that he sees tariffs ranging from 15 to 50%. Of course, tariff revenue has been part of this administration's push when it comes to potentially bringing down our national debt. But I want to get back to this conversation here about a potential government shutdown. When you hear Democrats talking that this could be a way to get more negotiating leverage, what would you advise them moving forward here as we look to a potential showdown, at least with the appropriations process in the fall?
Well, I just want to remind everybody who's watching that there is always a potential showdown with the continuing resolutions, and we get to this date of September 30th. There has not been an actual budget passed in America in decades, like when it was time to pass it. So the whole point is the showdown. It's the drama of the politics. I think what I would advise Democrats, especially as they're going home this summer to talk to their constituents, is to keep reminding the American public why. Why are we here? Why is the president pushing these quote unquote rescissions? Why are the Republicans trying to renege on money that was already budgeted and allocated to help and support the average American worker, regular American people? Why are they trying to claw that money back? They're stealing it back so that they can give it to the top 0.505% of billionaires, and to give out tax breaks for people that aren't most of us. That's the number one thing the Democrats can keep reminding everybody.
Well, Democrats are reminding everybody about Jeffrey Epstein a lot lately as well, Aisha, and I do need to get to this because members of the House are leaving town starting tonight because of a blow-up in the Rules Committee. Republicans decided to, the Speaker of the House decided to send everybody home instead of allowing Democrats to force a vote on releasing the Epstein files. Let's hear from the Speaker on his support as well of the House Oversight Committee's effort to subpoena convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell. He offered this caveat as well. Listen.
If they see fit to bring in Ghislaine Maxwell for testimony, that's fine. I will note the obvious concern, the caveat that Chairman Comer and I and everyone has, that could she be counted on to tell the truth? Is she a credible witness? I mean, this is a person who's been sentenced to many, many years in prison for terrible, unspeakable conspiratorial acts and acts against innocent young people. I mean, can we trust what she's going to say? Even if she raises her hand and says that she'll testify under oath, is that something that can be trusted? You know, that's a reasonable question. Is that credible evidence? I don't know.
So maybe an effort to discredit the witness here, Maura. I don't know if this would have ever happened in John Boehner's House of Representatives, but what are we in for here? Would testimony like this be public?
I can say that this nonsense would never have happened under Speaker Boehner's. He has a no-nonsense policy. But the fact that Speaker Johnson's calling into question this, I think that could work in both ways, right? I mean, one, she has nothing to lose, but, you know, two, if she was looking for some sort of lessening of a sentence, which I don't think is possible, but could she be pardoned on Trump's way out for having maintained silence? And, you know, the conspiracy theories that could come from that run the gamut, I would say. But I do think it's interesting that the decision to bring her in by House Oversight kind of happened without necessarily any involvement from the former president and from Speaker Johnson. I think that it was the pressure, and you saw it kind of play out with the House Rules Committee, the kind of issues they ran into there, and then this happened. And now DOJ is looking to bring her in as well. So it's interesting what that kind of spurred. But I do think that the more that it's a focus of Republicans, the more a problem it becomes for President Trump, as it already is, but it kind of carries that on, as opposed to the Democrats' focus on it, which actually kind of just weakens the entire controversy itself, because as it's been mentioned before, they've had 4 years. Chuck Schumer was in charge of the Senate. He could have really looked into this if he wanted to know about it. And so for him to speak up about it, for other Democrats to be so gung-ho about this, it really is kind of questionable. And if they get at a town hall and that's their focus, that's their message, they're missing huge opportunities to talk to their constituents about what really matters, kitchen table issues that they failed repeatedly to focus on in the last election. So they would be remiss if they did that again.
Well, Aisha, to this point, that lawmakers are going to be home during this recess, during this August recess, but it's our understanding that the deposition for Maxwell is going to be August 11th. So does that mean that this story isn't going away even as lawmakers are out of town here in Washington?
It seems to be something that, the media really thinks is juicy. And certainly, I think both sides feel that there is some political power in just bringing the truth to light. And that's what this is really about, right? Why don't we want to know the facts? Why don't we want to have transparency here? It's because the current sitting president of the United States and a whole lot of other rich and powerful people were involved with and at some point liked and enjoyed hanging out with a sex offender. Does that mean that they are guilty of something deep? Perhaps not. But the idea that there would be any association or affiliation is embarrassing. And there are a lot of rich and powerful people that don't want to be touched by that. And that's unfortunate because what we should be talking about are the actual victims, these poor girls that were trafficked. If, in fact, anybody, Republicans, Democrats, and the like, really cared about justice, we would be talking about the fact that Donald Trump has completely gutted and gotten rid of the Violence Against Women Act, which had funding and provisions to protect girls from sex trafficking. We would be talking more about the fact that this Republican Congress could care less about protecting women and girls, that this is really just a hot, juicy conversation that they're hoping that, both sides can score political points around. I really would like to see this be a more victim-centered conversation around any additional justice that might be out there to be had in their name and other things that we can do to protect people from experiencing something like this again and make sure that, we're doing what we can to stop out human trafficking.
Aisha Mills and Maura Gillespie will stick with us here for a short time longer. We want to bring you back to Donald Trump's speech, the president at the AI summit right now in Washington. This is live on Bloomberg TV and radio.
If you only build a chip company, these people have plenty of money. They don't need the money. They need the permits. They need the rights to do it. They don't want to pay tariffs, so they come and they build here. That's why they're coming here. They number one, they like me, but they like not having to pay tariffs even more. And they're coming. But Biden gave billions of dollars to companies that have nothing but cash. And they don't say where to build. It's just give them money. But here's the problem. They have to hire lots of woke people. And they say woke isn't for this particular industry. We've noticed that. They're not for a lot of industries, if you want to know the truth. So the guidelines were impossible. They're going to give you money, but you got to hire this and this and this and that. And I don't want to get into it too much because I don't want any controversy today. But you have to hire a lot of people that were not into this particular world that you're in. And so therefore, all the money they gave didn't mean a damn thing. One of Biden's worst executive orders established toxic diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology as a guiding principle of American AI development. So you immediately knew that was the end of your development. But the American people do not want woke Marxist lunacy in the AI models, and neither do other countries. They don't want it. They don't want anything to do with it. That's why on day one, I very proudly terminated Joe Biden's order on woke AI effective immediately. You don't have any of those crazy rules. Crazy rule. And in just a moment, I will be signing an order banning the federal government from procuring AI technology that has been infused with partisan bias or ideological agendas such as critical race theory, which is ridiculous. And from now on, the U.S. government will deal only with AI that pursues truth, fairness, and strict impartiality. We're not going to go through the craziness that we've gone through for the last 4 years. And then we skip 4, and then you go back, and it started then. But it hung around a little while. Now it's not hanging around at all. Now it's actually very uncool, as somebody told me the other day. It's so uncool to be woke. I encourage all American companies to join us in rejecting poisonous Marxism in our technology. It'll be very interesting to see what's happening in New York, because they're actually thinking about electing a communist in New York. They like to call him a socialist. He's not a socialist. He's a communist. But don't worry, you're going to be okay. He still has to get his money from the White House, and that's not going to happen until he shapes up. But as an example, we are not going to allow men to play in women's sports. That's an example. That's one. And they say that's an 80-20 number. They say 80% would be against it. No, it's not 80-20. It's about 97-3. And I don't know who the three are. I've never seen anybody. I've never had a person. I've seen everybody. I'm a very open person. They come up to me and they talk to me. I've never had anybody come up, sir, you have to let men play in women's sports. I've never had it. I deal with hundreds of thousands of people. Every time I talk to somebody, nobody's ever, they talk about AI, they talk about everything, but they've never said, you gotta allow, this is ridiculous. Men should be allowed to play in women's sports. It's sort of crazy, isn't it, huh? You have to see, did you see the race? It was a race, a long distance marathon, one of those all day deals. And we had one of the great female runners and we had one of the great male runners. And at the end of the day, he won the race by 5 hours and 14 seconds. They waited around for the really good athlete female. It's very demeaning to women, I want to tell you that. But they waited, her parents were waiting for hours. Somebody said, why don't you go back to the hotel and sleep for a few hours and come back and meet your daughter? This is what they do. You got to see the weightlifting records, though. They're the best of all. A woman lifted 212 pounds. It was a world record. It held for 18 years. And now a man who transitioned came up and looked at the bar. How much is it? 212 pounds. Oh, let me try it. Bing, bong. I think he broke the record by 109 pounds. It's going to be a long time. It's going to be a long time before a woman catches that. And these are great athletes and great people, and it's demeaning. And who the hell wants this? We're off of that whole standard, because I just tell you those as examples. We're off of it. The reason the last administration was so eager to regulate and restrict AI was so they could limit this technology to just a few large companies, allowing them to centralize it, censor it.
All right, President Trump dancing around the issue of AI here. We'll bring you back to his remarks when we hear more about the technology. We are also balancing a couple of stories today on Bloomberg about trade deals, or at least frameworks for trade deals with countries including Japan. And joining us this morning on Bloomberg TV and radio in an exclusive conversation on Bloomberg Surveillance, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talked about the latest on trade deals and his working relationship with the president. Let's listen.
The reason I think that I'm, to the extent I'm able to calm the markets, and that doesn't always happen. I was in the investment business for 35, 40 years, but I think more importantly than that, I understand what President Trump is doing. And a lot of times he's 1, 2, 3 steps ahead of the market. And, as you know better than anyone, the market wants instant explanations. They want clarity. They want immediate gratification. So I think that I'm able to, as a former practitioner, I think about when President Trump tells me what his goals are, I think about what is the best way for me to give good framing to market participants, for them to understand what he's doing, because he always has a plan. It's not always obvious.
So you are communicating almost the strategic ambiguity that he likes to operate from.
Well, and I'm also trying to explain that there is a plan, because look, these letters went out. Everyone was, oh my gosh, these are high rates. And I think the president created maximum negotiating leverage, and the market actually took it pretty well, took it pretty well.
Just to finish on that final point then, do you think he's more emboldened to go for higher rates with trading partners now, given the market is not pushing back?
Well, I think he's created a lot of leverage because he's created an A-B situation. He is able to go to the trading partners and say, look, I am happy to take in this tariff income if you don't want to negotiate. This is a high rate, but the U.S. is taking in massive amounts of tariff income. We had the first June budget surplus since 2015, last month. We reported it this month. And so we are taking in substantial income. So President Trump is creating this leverage by saying, if you don't want to negotiate with me, I've sent you a letter with a high rate. Have at the high rate or come and negotiate in better fashion. Because I'll tell you, what was fascinating for me, and this was President Trump at his best, was the Indonesians came with what I thought was a very good offer out of the blocks. President Trump kept pushing them. He raised the reciprocal rate when he sent them the letter, and 5 iterations later, the Indonesian trade deal was greatly improved, turned into a great deal for both sides.
That was part of a conversation with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent speaking with our Anne-Marie Herdern on Bloomberg Surveillance. You can find their full conversation online and on the terminal. We now want to continue the conversation by bringing in Laura Galante. She was previously the cyber intelligence lead for the Director of National Intelligence, and she's now principal at Westexec Advisors. Laura, we just heard the Treasury Secretary there talk about our trading partners. We know part of the tariffs that have been implemented have to do with national security concerns. How should we be thinking about national security when it comes to the U.S.'s future around artificial intelligence plans?
One of the key areas where we have to maintain American dominance, and I say this in a very nonpartisan way because I think this is a common thread from the last administration through this one, is making sure we have the underlying infrastructure to stay the leader in AI. And one of the pieces that the White House rolled out today that I thought was pretty forward-looking in this AI action plan was around how you build the energy infrastructure, the manufacturing infrastructure, and the data centers that are really the guts that power AI, and working on how you build some of that permitting and take that back to a place where it's easier to build here in the U.S. So that's a piece that really plays into the dominance against China and how we keep that here in the U.S.
President signing the executive orders now. If you're with us on Bloomberg TV or on YouTube, Bloomberg Originals, he's holding up the first EO related to AI. One of these actually has to do with, the president was just speaking about this, Laura, with what he calls woke AI, that he's taking the woke out of AI. What does that actually mean?
I'm not sure what to make of the noise around trying to change how AI is tilted towards a more woke environment. I think that's some of the noise to kind of cancel out here. I will say some of the safeguards and protections that folks have been really, really concerned about around AI are missing in what you see out of the White House today. You know, that said, the real drive here, and one of the surprises, is on how much the White House wants to drive on global standards. That means engagement with international partners. So I think, you know, that's a positive sign amidst some of these other motions that are out there.
I also want to ask you about export controls, Laura, which have really come into the conversation when we are talking about advanced semiconductors. We know that there is a needle that the administration has to thread here when it comes to innovation, but also protecting that innovation. In your view, has the administration's approach when it comes to export controls been working? And if at all, does anything have to change going forward?
I think the level of chaos writ large on trade deals in this administration has made it really hard for the companies that are trying to figure out what they can and can't import and export and what tariffs will look like. It's made it really hard for them to operate. So that at a global picture is huge and really limiting. I think the question is, how do you make sure that you have the alliances and the trade relationships in a place where certain types of chips, especially the inference ones, are ones that the U.S. has dominance on that supply chain? And I think there's a lot of devils in the details that aren't quite figured out here, and keeping focus on it's going to be the most important part, and that's tough in this environment. So let's hope they can make good on the promise of how you really keep the U.S. and our infrastructure here and the chips underneath of it in a place where we've got dominance on the models, but this is going to be tough, and we'll have to wait and see how they execute.
Laura Galante, Westexec Advisors. Laura, thank you so much for the insights. As always, we want to bring you back to the Mellon Auditorium, where President Trump just left the stage after signing the 3 EOs that we were waiting for related to AI, and spend some time with Ed Ludlow, the co-host of Bloomberg Tech. Ed, did anything happen this evening in that room, despite all the bold faces and the stories the president was telling, that actually will advance America's position in the AI race?
The deregulation and cutting of red tape that the AI action plan is based on, the content of the president's speech, along with the executive orders that he signed, it largely just simply relates to permitting, right? Not just the permitting of construction of data center here in the USA, but also permitting for supplies of electricity. And it was a heavy emphasis from the president on how these actions will allow the United States to plan for additional energy capacity that will help the nation keep pace with China, and a constant reference to respect for President Xi, his relationship with President Xi, but in the AI context, it is energy, in the domain of energy, where they will need to act most quickly. The president talked about the role that the private sector needs to play. He was very complimentary of the hyperscalers, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Meta, in the investments that they've already made, but that future investments will need to continue to come from the private sector. He name-checks Jensen Huang, the NVIDIA CEO, inviting him to stand up for a prompted standing ovation. But I think what's so interesting is this new approach from the administration on the diffusion rule, the willingness to export America's technology while also keeping an eye, as the president put it, on the rules of each of those jurisdictions that they will be sending the technology to. And then finally, I guess the issue of copyright was interesting. The president basically acknowledging that AI companies need to keep in line with contracts and also not breach or infringe copyright or IP, but they'll need to have access to data, something also contained in the AI action policy document.
All right, great reporting from Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow, host of Bloomberg Technology. We thank you so much. And Joe, it was a busy day here in Washington, not just artificial intelligence, but also, of course, the tariff potential deals.
Well, that's true. We had a trade deal announced, at least a framework with Japan. We could be on the verge of something with the EU. All of this has been moving stocks for the better today. Markets were rising once again, and the AI conversation is helping as well. NVIDIA shares up after hours today, along with Google, with a beat and a raise. Tesla is the exception, heading lower, down about 3% in after-hours trading following its earnings report. We'll see you back here tomorrow. This is Bloomberg TV and Radio.